Hey everyone, welcome back to Gaming with Amy. For this video, I'm excited to share some of my favorite dark and spooky cozy games. From emotionally resonant narratives to visual novels to cults and conspiracies, I've got something for every type of gamer. Don't worry, most of these aren't as in-your-face scary and overstimulating as, say, Resident Evil. We still like to keep things casual and cozy around these parts. So if you appreciate the macabre and darker themes, I think you're going to find something that piques your interest on this list. One quick thing before we get started. Go ahead and like this video and subscribe if you're looking for more cozy gaming content. Now, let's jump into my top dark and spooky cozy game recommendations. Little Misfortune. First on the list is one of my all-time favorites, Little Misfortune. In this narrative-driven horror comedy game, you play as Misfortune, a sweet little girl with an adorable beret and a wild imagination. We begin the game with a disembodied voice narrating, and it turns out that Misfortune can also hear this voice, whom she lovingly calls Mr. Voice. Mr. Voice coaxes her out of her home, promising eternal happiness at the end of her journey. And as you may have gathered already, Mr. Voice's intentions are clearly nefarious. While Little Misfortune juxtaposes the sweetness of its innocent main character with morbid imagery, the horror elements are never too overwhelming, at least to me. The game also deals with serious real-world issues that impact all types of families. Misfortune has a shaky home life, both of her parents afflicted by mental illness and substance abuse. And Misfortune will do anything to escape her reality, even if a stranger tells her to. So basically, do not sleep on Little Misfortune, people. It's truly an unforgettable gaming experience. Doki Doki Literature Club. Doki Doki Literature Club. What I wouldn't do to play this game for the first time again. It's one of those games that takes you completely by surprise, challenging everything you thought you knew about a particular genre. Yes, Doki Doki Literature Club looks like a super cute visual novel about high school, but there's something much more sinister at its core. The game follows the members of a literature club, including Sayori, who invites her shy childhood friend, the unnamed male protagonist, to join. The group is preparing poems to read at their school's upcoming cultural festival, and that's where normalcy ends. I don't want to get into too many details because I think it's best to go into it as blind as possible. I will say though that Doki Doki Literature Club is a one-of-a-kind gaming experience. You really haven't played anything like this before. I also wanted to note that Doki Doki Literature Club deals with some heavy mental health subjects, so maybe look into content warnings before playing if you're sensitive to that kind of thing. It's probably also the most intensely scary game on the list, so if you're not into that kind of thing, you should probably skip it. But if you are into that sort of thing, enjoy. Night in the Woods. Next up is one of my favorite narrative cozy games of all time, Night in the Woods. The story follows May, an anthropomorphic cat who decides to drop out of college and move back to her economically depressed rural hometown, Possum Springs. As she gets reacquainted with the town, as well as her friends and family, she starts having strange and frightening dreams, all leading to a propulsive end to the story. This game is such a great example of well-crafted storytelling. Night in the Woods feels like a novel, with its complex writing and on-point character development. This isn't a game you rapidly click through. The dialogue is crucial to your gameplay experience. Night in the Woods also touches on themes of capitalism and how it's destroyed small-town economies. This is folded into the storytelling very naturally, which I think accurately depicts how pervasive and insidious capitalism has become in America. It's also worth noting that if you love fall, you'll absolutely want to play Night in the Woods during spooky season. The game is filled with warm color tones, autumnal scenery, and obviously a thrilling narrative. What Remains of Edith Finch. Next up, I have yet another narrative-based recommendation, What Remains of Edith Finch. Primarily a story-heavy exploration game, What Remains of Edith Finch takes place at the unnamed player character's ancestral home on Orchid Islands, Washington. With her, she has Edith Finch's diary, which details Edith's final visit to the home. As you make your way through the house and find various clues, you're transported into Edith's perspective during the visit she details in her diary. And what you get from the game is an emotionally complex and imaginative story that will honestly have you in tears at the end. What makes this a dark game is the utter tragedy the Finch family goes through, generation after generation. Seriously, it's like one blow after another as you learn more about the family members and what they've gone through. But as a reader, I appreciated the depth of the story and the complexity of each family member. Trust me, this is a solid narrative game you cannot skip. Penko Park. So here's a killer premise for a game. Pokemon Snap but spooky. I've never played Pokemon Snap, but damn does it sound like a good time. So when I first heard about Penko Park, I knew I had to play it. Penko Park is a photography and creature collector game. Basically, you sit in a floating vehicle as you're driven through a wildlife park filled with weird, unearthly creatures lurking in the trees, underwater, and sometimes right behind you. Your goal is to take pictures of all the creatures in different positions. Of course, there's a darker story at the heart of Penko Park. Throughout the game, you'll learn more about the park's history and secrets, which seem kind of bad and exploitative if you ask me. Penko Park isn't too scary though, so you can play it pretty casually. And do make sure to play with the game's audio, which adds so much to the gameplay. Slay the Princess. Ah yes, another disembodied voice game. Is it weird that I'm drawn to these? Anyway, the premise of Slay the Princess is quite simple. You, the unnamed hero, are met in the middle of the woods by an off-screen narrator who tells you to trek to a cabin where a princess is chained up. Once you get there, you must kill her, or she'll bring about the end of the world. What drew me into this game was its experimentation with fairy tale narratives and hero damsel in distress tropes. It's also a choose-your-own-adventure game where a single, sometimes seemingly insignificant choice heavily impacts where the story goes and how it ends. This is not a game that's meant to be played through once. You'll find yourself hiking to that cursed cabin dozens of times to slay the not-so-innocent princess, and usually you're the one that ends up dead. Don't let the game's gorgeous hand-drawn art style lull you into a false sense of security. This is not Sleeping Beauty, folks. Slay the Princess gets quite dark at times, so a word of warning. You may want to check content warnings for this one too. Beacon Pines. Conspiracy theorists unite! I think you'll be pleased to discover that there's actually a legitimate conspiracy in the small town of Beacon Pines. In Beacon Pines, you play as Luca, an anthropomorphic deer who lives with his grandmother. His father died when he was 6, and his mother mysteriously disappeared. The game involves talking to townsfolk and uncovering the mysteries that seem to plague the town, some of which impact Luca personally and finally give him the answers he's looking for. What makes Beacon Pines unique is that you can redo a decision you make. For example, if your path ends up with a government goon capturing Luca, you can reverse the story a few steps back to get a better outcome. It's such an interesting way to play with in-game storytelling, and it makes Beacon Pines more engaging than a typical narrative game. And also, the art style is just really cute, and I would like a plushie of every single character, please. And here we are at the end of the list. Have you played any of these? Let me know which ones you loved. And of course, if you have any recommendations for me, I would love to hear them. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.